welcome to Night Clerk Radio, episode 70, where this episode, as we head into the holiday season, we've decided to discuss consumerism for holidays and Vaporwave as a critique of consumerism and all the ways in which consumerism manifests in the Vaporwave culture. And I am joined on this shopping spree by one Mr. Ross Payton.
Hey, how you doing?
Hey.
Yeah, no, I'm quite excited for the true holiday of the season. The reason for the season, the reason why we care so much about this, to reunite all of humanity in a celebration of love and community. Black Friday. Sometimes
Stampedes and mass shootings, but
well, I mean, that's community.
Also, love and community. You're talking about Black Friday, which is, of course, traditionally the biggest retail day. I don't know if that's still true, but it was always raised to believe that it was the biggest retail day of the year. It's the Friday immediately after Thanksgiving Thursday, where everyone ever just has massive sales because it's the only time that they make up for the rest of the year. No one buying anything. People don't buy TVs every day and shit. So it's an interesting cultural phenomenon because it's expanded out into weeks, and the Monday after is now Cyber Monday.
And
Black Friday sales start, they do this early Black Friday. They open up earlier and earlier. I've seen ads that are starting November 1st, it's our Black Friday sales. I'm you're not even trying anymore.
And it's called Black Friday because this is when retail stores get in the black, at least metaphorically. Right. So the entire economy hinges on us irrationally spending vast amounts of money in a month and a half in order for Christmas gifts and all that, which is absolutely insane that it's also backloaded. But here we are. And Vaporwave is, of course, commonly considered a critique of capitalism and consumerism in particular. So there's a lot to talk about.
Yeah. And I think understanding the critique of consumerism is probably an important first step. It's real straightforward, is that in previous episodes, we've talked about how Vaporwave relies a lot on plunderphonics, reprocessing of pop culture, reprocessing of pop imagery. We've also talked about in culture jamming that a lot of those reappropriation of band logos and signs and repurposing them is also a way of kind of all coming together to kind of make fun of kind of the vapidness of consumer culture and sort of that commodity, I must own things, both to satisfy some identity and also because we just fucking love to buy shit. And Vaporwave, sort of part of the vapor in Vaporwave, is that all of that is kind of a nebulous, thin-screened lie that is just slick corporate advertising and propaganda, basically. So that's sort of where the critique in consumerism starts at the most basic level.
I mean, so many things now are meant to be gifts, that they're kitchen gadgets and
cars, if you believe the Mercedes ads.
Oh yeah. Exercise, things, a lot of clothing, games that obviously would attract, grandparents more than the actual kids who play them. So many things are made just to be given to people and then of course not used because they're not really that useful. And yeah, I mean, Vaporwave is about this kind of conspicuous consumption and wastefulness, the excess of consumerism, because everything Vaporwave is focusing on the cheerfulness of buying, just the music that you hear in Mallsoft of oh, here's this happy music you get to listen to as you're going around buying things. And, everything is just this subtle push to get you to spend and spend and spend.
Big numby go up energy. And it's for everything. It's consumption to the point of ridiculousness. So I think for around this time of year, if you pick a hobby, something we both like to do, something that should just be a thing you do, that's not should not be ideally an identity or a consumer angle, but say we both like coffee, right? We both do our nonsense little AeroPresses and stuff. I guarantee you there's probably 1,000 sites that are procedurally generated 10 gifts for the coffee lover in your life. And, two will make sense. Two will be new coffee. Great. I need that. And the others will just be more of things you already have. They better have a good mug. It's If I know someone drinks coffee so much that I think that, like, you know what, this is the avenue I'm going to go for my present for them, I'm going to assume they got like mugs and shit to make coffee.
Yeah.
But it doesn't matter. Like, you need
a better mug.
Chemexes. You need a better mug.
You need a better
new
mug.
ones.
Get a Yeti mug.
Better mugs than other people. Yep.
Yeah.
There you go. Get a Yeti mug.
Yeah.
So it's just like kind of all this ridiculous, just you have to keep consuming.
Yeah. It's sort of like the entire like paradox of capitalism is that that growth or profitability isn't enough. It's that you have to grow. It has to grow faster than it has before. And so you can have a sustainable like economy where people are buying and people are making profit and everything's working, but that's not enough. You have to have this, insane growth of like Facebook in the first 2 years. That's the kind of model of growth that has to be sustained indefinitely. And, once, people get their coffee mugs and their TVs, they don't need them for like years and years. As a thought experiment just recently, I bought a coffee mug that's one of those heat ones that like changes the color when it activates. Yeah. I bought this like 3 years ago and it cost about $20 with shipping included. And so like, okay, I've been using this mug every day since then, except for maybe 100 days. And so like I calculated how many days it had been since I bought it. And I was like, oh, I'm still like 2 cents per use of this mug. Like I need to have this mug for another 3 years before it's below 1 penny per usage of the mug. Like, yeah, it takes so long for it to be basically free. So like, I'm still basically paying a few pennies every time I'm using the mug. Things are just, even cheap things are now insanely often very durable and they'll last for years. I'm still using like an electric kettle. It's like $50 and like, but capitalism needs you to, you gotta
have a new one.
Gotta have a new one. Gotta have a nicer one. Gotta have new features. Like
you need a gooseneck or a temperature control, or
it's dirty. The old ones, why bother cleaning it when you can just get
doesn't
a
look
shiny
in style anymore?
Yeah, that's true. And I think that's what Vaporwave is really trying to focus on. A lot of the classic albums are focusing on the marketing that encourages people to do this. Infinity Frequency is doing these hypnotic loops of Chanel commercials, and things like that. And then, the soft lullaby of mall soft, it's so that's how I think Vaporwave critiques capitalism, is that it's shining it back in our faces and like highlighting the stuff that's just sort of done on the periphery. All the music that is used to encourage us to buy is never meant to be focused on. It's always meant to be like, don't look at this. Don't pay attention to this. Focus on the thing that you're going to buy and how great it's going to be. But by isolating it and like messing with it, like Vaporwave is like, this is kind of weird, right? Like you feel this too, right? This is messed up, isn't it? Like,
yeah, you probably have heard the Chanel commercial this many times, just not in a row.
Yeah.
It's kind of weird when it's all put together.
Yeah, exactly. Mac tonight was weird, wasn't it? Like that was a whole thing. Like trying to get people to buy McDonald's late at night. Like, wasn't it enough to have it as, for morning, lunch, and dinner? Like, did we have to have a, midnight?
So they invented fourth meal.
They invented fourth meal. Like we're fucking hobbits, Jesus. But, there's a lot of course, academic and sort of like critical essays about like, is Vaporwave really critiquing consumerism? And there's a lot of debate about that, at least among academia.
Yeah. And like, there's like a little bit of pushback from artists and stuff too, in a lot of these same articles and interviews. I think some people like George Clanton and Equip and even to a lesser extent, Vectroid have kind of, warned against kind of this over academization, academizing, whatever the conjugation is there.
Yeah, as an artist, it must be infuriating to have someone tell you what your art means. Yeah, and like it's just like you're just subscribing you're just ascribing a lot of shit to me that like I don't necessarily. I wasn't even thinking of this shit. Like it's sort of. It's kind of an impossible situation and to be an artist to critique their critiques. Sure.
I think it's always like a thing I point out, and that we're kind of just talking about. In some sense, I can only discuss what stuff means to me or what the appeal of it is to me. Yeah. So like I would never want to like expand these critiques to the artist themselves or whatever, because I don't know. Maybe not. But like I always say, and we always say is, creation happened under material conditions for a reason. I think if you look around for a little bit, maybe some of the reasons you picked what you picked will become apparent.
Yeah.
That's what I always say. Yeah. I don't know.
I mean, the artist is also part of the material conditions, and the artist, it's impossible to critique yourself. You can only look at yourself in the mirror. You can't look at yourself as others would look at you, because, a mirror distorts things. It's flipped, so, I mean, it's important to self-reflect, but yeah, it's impossible to truly do it. So it's this paradoxical challenge, and, death of the author and all that jazz too. So it doesn't matter what the artist says.
It's true. We also can't properly self-reflect on maybe what these assholes sound like sometimes talking about this stuff this way. So,
Well, I think a lot of artists, vaporwave artists in particular, you've pointed this out a lot, and I've seen it too, of oh, my art isn't political, or I don't, want to talk about this, or I just like making this cool music, man. Some of that, I think, is just entirely a defensive mechanism, because you have 100% of your audience now. If you say something that would be well, obviously capitalism is a monster and we're all going to die because of it and blah, 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 you're going to alienate 1%, 5%, 10% of your audience, maybe more. Because they don't want to think about that. They don't want to think about they don't agree with you on they maybe there's a Venn diagram where they're into vaporwave and fan of Elon Musk, that exists, So as an artist, you're well, I could say that and be true to myself and then lose 10% of my fan base. At some point you do want to say certain things fascism is evil and anyone who's a fascist is a piece of shit, but how far do you go? And that's always a conundrum only the individual artist can answer.
Yeah. And, that seems like a bit of a digression that we just had, but actually I think your last point about alienating consumers basically loops back around to kind of the second part, is that it's very easy to say oh, you make anti-consumerist music, yet you need it to be consumed. Curious, I am very smart. Yep. So that does link back around to kind of the interesting aspect of vaporwave, is that it does have a lot of, in the culture, at least as an observer, I'm not deep into it like some of our friends or whatever, but it does seem like it starts to become a thing where you do have to start to consume vaporwave. You get pulled into those same mechanisms, the way in which capitalism subsumes you into doing all of that, even as you listen to something that's a fairly punk, DIY anti-consumerist aesthetic, becomes interesting. So then you get into this culture of selling physicals. I sell my music, sell physicals before COVID. And I know people are trying to get these back on track, concerts, shows, merch.
Yeah, that's the thing is in order to be an artist, if you're a vaporwave producer, musician, and you want to make vaporwave, you have two choices, right? You either have a day job and do this as a hobby, or you try and do it full time as a professional artist. And the way, now I'm not an expert in the economics of music in terms of how artists make their money, but from what I have read, what little I do know, it seems like streaming is not the solution. You make very little money if your music's on Spotify and YouTube mixes and that kind of thing. So you need to make either digital album sales and or physical media releases. And given the explosion of physical media releases in vaporwave in the last couple of years, I remember 10 years ago, there weren't nearly as many physical media drops, and they were all cassettes, and they were all very limited runs, 10 copies, 20 copies. And that still happens. But now we have I'd say in the last 4 years, a lot of people putting things on vinyl, and a huge number of albums being re-released on vinyl and cassette. So I'm judging this entirely on what vaporwave record labels are doing and what artists are doing. Is then they are Infinity Frequencies has come back and has done a lot of vinyl releases and that kind of thing.
Or vinyl represses of a few that I've even have bought, right? I've engaged in this consumption of them. As Groceries did some vinyl represses, and Catcore repressed News at 11, the 9/11 album we've talked about a few times.
Yeah.
So there's all these re-releases of albums that kind of came out in an era where there just wasn't the market to really do physicals for them.
That is my theory, is that this is how vaporwave artists make most of their money, is through physical media. Probably digital album sales too, especially with Bandcamp Friday and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's still, and then like live shows, at least maybe this year, like live shows have started back up. A friend of mine actually went to a 100% electronica show recently to see George Clinton and Death's Dynamic Shroud. And and he got some merch from it. He even got me like a Death's Dynamic Shroud hat. It's a good hat, Burke. So
okay, that's fine.
Yeah,
it's just a funny hat to have to me.
It has silly. A Japanese character for Dai on it.
Nice.
Yeah. You know, there's of course a lot of debate in the vaporwave community about whether this is like selling out or whether this is hypocritical. And then of course there's also the problem of fraud and like unauthorized people just making their own vinyl drops of albums that they don't have the rights to, you know, just like, I'm just going to release Macintosh Plus Floral Shop as a vinyl.
Yeah.
I've never, who's Vectroid? I don't know who that is. Yeah. It's free, right? I could just press this to vinyl and counterfeits and that kind of thing. Yeah.
That it is actually surprising there's not more of a market of people who like just rip all these YouTube mixes that people put effort into.
Oh yeah.
And just pop them on a cassette or something and resell them.
Or VHS tape, really.
Yeah.
That would be.
Yeah, if you want to do the full visual. Yeah, depending on. Yeah.
I actually did buy which I haven't received it yet, but a Blu-ray supposedly is going to be released of the Late Night Lo-Fi Festival from this summer, which is like 12 hours of visual mixes or something ridiculous like that. And I'm looking forward to getting that so I can just put it on and vibe for, hours. But I don't think it's bad. You know, I'm obviously artists need to make a living as a content creator. I pseudo the struggle.
You get it.
Yeah, I get it. It's impossible to critique capitalism now because everyone's involved in it. Like there's no escape from capitalism. Like if you, even if you live out in the woods, like you're somehow going to be interfacing with capitalism. Like those lone guys who live out in the cabin, build their own cabin out in the forest somewhere, eventually have to go into town to get supplies. And they had the money and the time to build up the skills and resources to do that in the first place. That's a bit of a tangent, but that's a whole genre on YouTube is guy who goes out in the woods, builds a cabin from just, their materials.
Anarcho-primitivism, YouTube stuff.
There's anarcho-primitivist subreddits. So
like you said, you're embedded in the system and you're very limited at the choices you have to fight back without completely sacrificing everything. Now, I've just been thinking about it since you mentioned it, but I would love if a vaporwave artist, both someone huge and someone smaller, to do like, here's my finances from doing this, just to see about your like physical media theory. Because there are people who don't do physical media, right? So they rely entirely, I imagine, on just people buying an album, which is why we try to support every artist we talk about on the show.
Yeah.
But then to someone like huge under the 100% electronic banner, like R23X and or Equip, do they make more from physicals? They make more from shows, merch? I don't know. Do they still not make enough to do this full time? Do they still have day jobs?
Yeah. Or maybe freelance gigs or
or just other stuff.
Yeah, that would be real interesting. I imagine there's a couple that would. I think Vectroid is actually a pretty active streamer. They're on Twitch.
Yeah, she streams a lot.
Yeah, so I think she gets actually a good amount from Twitch. But that's it's very few people can get like a sustainable audience. You need like, if you had 100 people watching you every day, that would be great. Like that, and that's like what 5% of streamers or something probably of Twitch. So. To get think about how much you need just to live and like how many people are going to donate and like what's Twitch's cut. So you really need you only get like half of what, the person's paying because Twitch takes such a massive cut. Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of the people just as a content creator, I'm technically a writer, but I get more money from talking about writing than actually writing.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. So I think the person who releases new stuff on a regular basis and interacts with the audience gets more money than the person who just does a physical, just album drops and physical media releases. But yeah, I don't know. I'd be fascinated to look into that more. But to go back to the topic of vaporwave and the holidays, the idea is, again, I think vaporwave arose because of everyone's sort of anxiety and uncertainty recognizing either consciously or subconsciously that capitalism is really fucking weird and unnatural in a way. It sort of intrudes on us to make demands, and making music to sort of like mediate that is meaningful, and also, you know, like a way of dealing with the anxiety, you know, and the more artists who can do that and make that kind of music, the better. So I buy physical media. We both brought the fucking wax cylinder.
Yeah, that's
I just mentioned the Blu-ray. I don't buy as much now because I have like a chest full of Vaporwave cassettes. I stopped buying them because I was running out of room to store them. I was like, I don't have any place to store them now. Like, that's it. Once I get rid of some of these tapes, I'm not gonna buy any more because I don't want to have them. You know, I don't want to be a Vaporwave hoarder.
Yeah. I felt bad. I've had to pass on some vinyls for that exact reason of like, I just don't want more things to move.
Yeah.
If when I eventually move, but once I'm settled down somewhere more permanent, it's tempting. It's tempting to just go crazy with buying so much cool stuff, but then you just end up with a bunch of stuff. Like it's kind of sucks in its own right.
Mm-hmm. The real thing is like, listen to some Vaporwave. If you were to take something away from this, one thing, there's actually like a whole subgenre of Vaporwave that specifically is about Vaporwave or about Black Friday. Yeah. You know, there are mixes. There's a really good mix on YouTube called Black Friday that has, what I really like are the visual mixes that like take the visuals from like commercials from that era, 80s and 90s commercials. Because when you watch like a bunch of TV commercials, like out of context, like as a compilation, like from a different era, you're looking at more objectively. You're not immersed in that era's culture. So like they're so fucking weird in like the way they appeal to people and like all the minor little visual stylisms and like stylistic conventions, I guess, it's just fascinating to see what was. Oh, this is clearly for upper class people. Oh, this is for people aspiring to be middle class. Oh, this is for actual rich people, or this is for poor people, you know, and trying to figure it out. So it's really good. Black Friday Vaporwave Holiday Special by Confused Byproduct of a Misinformed Culture, which they do a lot of interesting mixes of varying genres, not just, I like their trip hop mixes, at least not so much the dubstep stuff, but
that's interesting. So I had not heard of them until you linked me that Black Friday video, which I vaguely remembered.
Yeah, I actually backed their Patreon for a while to get some more mixes. They're still doing stuff. Oh, that's cool. I haven't listened to their stuff much in years.
Perhaps you should consume more of their media.
Yeah, basically. Yeah, there's other ones, you know, Black Friday deals, and like there's just a lot of mixes. It's a very common thing, but like, yeah, I don't know. I like it.
Yeah, so that'll definitely be in the show notes for people to check out. I think like the last somewhat interesting kind of thought I had about consumption of Vaporwave and whatnot is like commodity fetishism as it relates to like Vaporwave. Because I think there's like another important aspect, and this comes up, this is like Marx Capital 1 of like perception of the relationship between like money, social relationships, commodities, etc. in capitalism. And one aspect of that doesn't come up as often. It's often just used to be like, oh, you know, look at all this stuff they produce, blah, 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 which is certainly true. But like an important part of that also is the consumer loses sight of the worker in the product, basically. And I sort of get that vibe that sometimes happens or is made even worse by modern conditions, just because I think people do forget that all this stuff they're consuming and these Twitter feeds they're reading and stuff, that they're like human beings on the other end, that the music you listen to is like a product of labor and takes time and effort and energy and money. But like digital distribution and like just taking stuff and reposting it and everything, you kind of lose sight of the artist also behind the art. I don't know quite where I'm going with that, but that's like the other aspect of all of this to me, is that I do think that, yeah, people forget that there's a human being producing everything that they consume, and that person needs support because much like you, they need a house, they need food, at the very least, and the ability to continue to create. So I don't know, like for me, probably just an old fashioned thing. Physicals help break through that a little bit, like, cause it's a thing. It's not as nebulous as just having a bunch of MP3s or whatever downloaded from Bandcamp. I don't know. That's just been the other thing I've gotten out of this podcast is just that like all this stuff is produced by mostly cool people. All my interactions with like artists and creators on Twitter have been very friendly, and they just seem to be happy that people are talking about what they do.
Yeah.
Like that they're not just screaming out into the void.
Yeah. I mean, that's the real thing. I mean, it's like why we make art in general, like it is to communicate to other people, it's not, I mean, it's two-faced. Like one side is, it is personal. And in the act of creating art, it's, exercise for your creative brain, and you feel more fulfilled doing it. It is meaningful to you, but also it is a way to communicate what you find meaningful to other people, and hopefully finding some sort of shared grounds. Like, oh yes, that means something to me. I'm like, yes, I get it. And I always think about like every time I read like an older book or an older essay or something like that, something from decades or years and years ago, and I read a passage and it's like, holy shit, I know what the author is talking about. This is something like, it could be something trivial, it could be something big, but it's like, yes, the author gets me. Like I get what the author is trying to say exactly. And that sort of link between us, we're a social species, and like finding that commonality is great, and is the opposite of alienation, which is what capitalism is trying to do to us, to make us little individual atoms and cogs in a giant machine where we're all commodities. We're all replaceable parts that can be serviced and exchanged for other workers. And this is saying, we're not, we're unique individuals with histories and patterns that are, So yeah, it's a sort of fighting against the urges of capitalism to create art without like even that is meaningful. Not just like, I'm making this because I know it'll be popular and sell. I'm making this because it is meaningful, like to me at least.
Yeah, and I hope it's meaningful to someone else.
Yeah, at some point we probably should do more like look into the background, like what's it like to be a hustle and vaporwave artist on the go these days?
Yeah, it'd be an interesting little project once some things slow down on my end. Reach out to some people, see if they'd be willing to chat, because I don't know. I feel like there could be like a little expose there or something of just like, I don't know. I think, at the end of the day, I just want people to support artists.
Yeah, so no, exactly.
Making stuff.
It's sort of a parallel. I've realized recently that like almost every video game I've given a shit about in the last 5 years has probably longer. Like I am more excited and more willing to play a game that is made by like 1 or 3 people, 1 to 3 people that has a weird premise, than like the latest AAA game, the little, big budget multi-million-dollar game. And because like, oh, you say this game is set in the Swiss Alps and it's about folk horror and like weird shit like that, and everything looks like it's drawn by pencil. Well, hell, that's a hell of a lot more interesting to me than like the latest God of War. Like I'll fucking play that. I don't give a shit.
No, I totally agree. I always make that mistake where sometimes I will like just by hype grab a game and then immediately regret it. I think like I got like Cyberpunk on Steam, on sale too, not even full price, and long after they fixed a lot of the launch bugs. I played it for like 30 minutes and I was like, I know I'm not going to play this.
I feel like for me, Cyberpunk 2077 is worth $10. When it is $10, I will buy it and try it out. But there's nothing about that is worth, even like right now it's on sale for like half off or something. So I'm like, yeah, no, it's fine. It's fine. I don't give a shit. But yeah, like give me like a weird indie game that is like meant as with a weird perspective. I'm like, hell yeah, I'll fucking play that. I don't give a shit. Like, and like Vaporwave is the same way. Like I would rather have like a weird album that is, let's see here. Yeah, like I'm just looking actually at my Bandcamp purchases right now. And I have one called Man Fears the Darkness, and so he scrapes away at the edges of it with fire by My Sister's Fugazi shirt. Like, and I'm like, yeah, this is great. I love this. Yeah. So I think that is like a meaningful action against it to seek out weird shit and not be driven by algorithms and like sell all these manipulative things that marketing does to get us to buy things, and to purposely seek out shit that is incredibly obscure and like very cool.
I do agree with you that I do tend to prefer obscure art, but I think for me, it's less about being anti the main stuff and just kind of frustrated with the enclosed choices you're given these days.
That's fair. Yeah.
You just get quickly algorithmically separated into some little weird bubble of whatever you consume. And I think just constantly poking and prodding at that is what's really interesting to me.
No, for sure. Well, hopefully none of you who are listening to this get trampled at a Black Friday sale.
Well, if they did, this comes out after Black Friday. So if they did, they wouldn't be here anyway.
It's true.
Thanks so much for listening. I hope we have inspired you to go out and support artists that mean something to you, especially this time of year, especially Bandcamp Friday. Pay attention to that because then Bandcamp doesn't take their cut. Probably the best day to buy a bunch of stuff from people you like. Next episode, we're going to be talking about 2 albums. We're going to be following up on Utopian Virtual by covering Dystopian Virtual.
Oh, no. It's the bad sequel. It's gone grimdark.
It is.
Yeah.
It's the grimdark sequel to Utopian Virtual, Dystopian Virtual. If you like what we do and you want to hear more of it, we do have a Patreon at Night Clerk Radio at patreon.com. We have 21, almost 2 years worth of bonus episodes that you can check out. There's a Discord. There's a community you can join. That's really cool. You can talk about these types of things with a wide variety of people who know a lot of interesting stuff. If you want to talk to us, you can also find us on Twitter at Night Clerk Radio. I am at Burke McBurkinson. Ross is at Ross Payton. We're also at Night Clerk Radio. Pretty much anywhere else you can think of. Instagram, Hive, maybe. I don't know. Co-host. All the post-Twitter social medias that have arisen. nightclerkradio.com, et cetera, et cetera. Wherever you do choose to listen to us, just take a moment to give us 5 stars or click a thumbs up or a like, whatever they got. Really lets the algorithm know that you like what we're doing and it helps a lot. Mm-hmm. And most importantly, as we always advocate, talk to people, build communities, make friends, talk to them about things you're interested in. Hopefully one of those is this show. But if not, that's fine. As long as you're out there making pals.
Yeah.
Yeah. Friends. All right. Thank you so much again. And we'll catch you next time. Bye.
Bye.